Hang on. Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's Tuesday night, and that means it's Scottish night on the Restore UK podcast. And so I am delighted to welcome my good friend, Mev Brown. Mev, good evening.
Good evening, David.
It's wonderful to be here. It's certainly a thrill, as the Beatles sang many years ago. Anyway, as is traditional on our podcast, and let's remember, the purpose of this podcast is to present a Scottish slant on the Restore UK's drive to maintain the United Kingdom and to hold the country together, which we all endeavour to do. So, given that, let me ask you, in time-honoured fashion, to introduce yourself, Mev. Tell us all about yourself, please.
Hi. Well, very briefly.
Oh my God. Go on.
Sorry, lost the connection there for a second.
Go on, Mev.
Yeah, I've been in politics since 2004, and really what inspired me to get involved in politics was the Iraq War. I actually enlisted in the Territorial Army in 2003, ready to go off and fight the good fight in Iraq. Then we had the Buck report and that inquiry, and I just felt I'd been taken for a mug by Tony Blair. So I joined the Tory Party in 2004, and I've been very active in it ever since. My main thing is I'm really good at writing articles about politics, doing a lot of social media work on politics. Beyond that, my background, I've spent about over 10 years in the Territorial Army altogether, mostly in the Parachute Regiment. Beyond that, I've worked in the defence avionics sector. I've worked in the home sector for 18 years. I've worked in recruitment for 10 years. So I've got a very broad range of life experience. So yeah, I've got a great deal to contribute towards the policy debate.
Fantastic. Well, what we seek, as you probably know, Mev, is people who, much like you, have got a grounding in the political sphere and who can help to protect Scotland from the nationalist tide which threatens to engulf us. So it's fantastic to hear what you've been involved in. Normally what I do is say, who are you? And second question is, how you become involved in politics? But you've kind of encapsulated both in the first answer, which is brilliant. So anyway, so it's terrific. So just can I just ask you on a personal level? You said that the Iraq War encouraged you to get involved in politics. Did you feel that the second Iraq War, I guess that is, was you felt that was what's the word? You felt there was no justification for going in the second time. Is that what I'm? Is that what
I did do a lot of research at the time, and certainly I did speak to some people in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and basically, from the various research efforts that I made, I certainly took the view that Tony Blair went into Iraq for his own reasons. It was absolutely nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction. The fact that they didn't find any is a matter of public record. But from what I can see, they knew there never was going to be any. So he took the country to war for personal reasons. He's never explained what they were. In terms of it was the right thing to do, but that's just a line for the papers. And taking the country to war is probably the biggest decision any prime minister can take. And to take the country to war on the false pretext is just beyond the pale. As far as I'm concerned, he really should be tried for war crimes. If Iraq ever issued out an arrest warrant, I would certainly be happy to see him extradited and face justice. Over 400 British military personnel died in Iraq. Obviously, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Iraqis over the years. It was just a disaster of unbelievable proportions. And then to be appointed as a peace envoy for the Middle East, it was just. There seems to be no limits to the Labour Party's, incompetence. Basically, I mean, it's beyond incompetence. I mean, this is something else. It's just terrific. So yeah.
Wow, I mean, it's powerful stuff, Mev, and I'm truthfully captivated here you saying this stuff, because I don't think enough is said about the fact that in the early 2000s, the Labour Party, the Labour government as it was then, led the country into a truly unforgivable set of circumstances where it was blindingly obvious to most people that there was no justification for it, whatever, but they did it nonetheless. And look at the fallout from that. You've got the Labour Party is now unelectable. We've had a succession of Conservative governments who really aren't particularly competent, and you've had David Cameron, who's given up 2 referendums or referenda. I'm not sure what I'm still not sure what the collective pronoun is for those 2. But anyway, he as a result of which the UK left the EU, and Scotland came uncomfortably close to leaving the UK. So really, the fallout from the second Iraq War has been cataclysmic, really, and so I don't believe we can say enough about it. And you probably know this, Mev, but George Galloway is somebody whose views I hold very dear. I don't agree with him on everything by any means, and he knows that, and all of my followers know that. But George Galloway said, "Don't go into the Iraq," and he was right. He said many other things too. And most of them he's right too. Also, George Galloway was expelled from the Labour Party because he disagreed with their decision to go into the Iraq War. But 20 years on, or however many years it was, 18 years on, whatever, who's got it right, really? Who's got it right? So it was a terrible time, and a truthfully awful set of circumstances. And just look at where we are now. The Scottish National Party is strong now because the Scottish Labour Party is weak. And most of the reason why the Scottish Labour Party is weak is because of the second Iraq War. So we cannot stress enough what a catastrophic decision it was to go into Iraq militarily for a second time in the early 2000s. An appalling decision. And we're still bearing the brunt of it now. We're still paying the price for it right now. Awful. Dreadful. So I have every justification. So with your thinking there. So, Mev, tell us more then. So you, in 2005, was it you joined or 2004, you joined the Conservative Party, is that right?
That's right. And I stood for the Conservatives in Edinburgh East in 2005 general election.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, I was kind of really shocked at the Scottish Conservative Party. I did leave the month after the general election. I thought they ran a terrible campaign, like really amateur hour stuff. And in the wider context, one of my concerns is the main threat to the union is the Scottish Unionist parties. Obviously Scottish Labour, that wasn't, to go to interact wasn't Scottish Labour's decision, but they paid the price. I've done one of my fortes is polling, and one of the specialities within that area is what motivates people to vote and what motivates people to change the way they vote.
Yep.
And I've done polling on the Labour Party. It was in the Sunday Times a couple of years ago, and basically Iraq was one of the major think twice about voting for Labour. The other two major events, there's literally a laundry list of incidents and events that have driven Labour voters away from the Labour Party. But the big one, the first one that made a lot of people hesitate is Iraq. But then the two other major ones was the independence referendum. A lot of Labour supporters saw, to coin the term voters used on the doorstep, they saw Labour getting into bed with the Tories to fight the independence referendum. And for a lot of Labour voters, that was just beyond the pale. That was totally unacceptable. And the third major event was the referendum itself. The Labour Party today, and this is true north and south of the border, is essentially two parties. On the one hand, you've got a cosmopolitan elite who are pro-union, typically professional, above average wages, homeowners, all that kind of thing. And on the other hand, you've got the traditional working class voter who is below average wages, not university educated, and so on. So the Labour Party is essentially, north and south of the border, is essentially two parties. And in Scotland, the bulk of those voters have switched to the SNP. The flip side, and this is the irony, the flip side is about 250,000 working class Labour voters switched to the Tories because of the pro-Brexit decision, despite the fact Ruth Davidson was a major Remain campaigner. So they were switching to the Tory party in Scotland because of Boris Johnson and Brexit,
yes.
not because of Ruth Davidson and Remain. Scottish politics is getting very complicated in the undercurrents that are driving voting intentions in recent years and into the future.
It's fascinating you should say that. Genuinely, I find this whole debate fascinating. Ruth Davidson, it is felt, resonated with the Scottish electorate in 2017, and as a result, in that election, the Conservatives did comparatively well. They got a few seats. We know that. Nonetheless, as soon as Boris Johnson was elected as appointed Conservative Party leader, and therefore Prime Minister in 2019, I think, Ruth Davidson could not get out of Dodge fast enough. She just left. That was it. No, I'm not doing this. Can't stand it. Clearly, because Boris Johnson had modelled himself as an Brexiteer, and Ruth Davidson was a Remainer, and she was into a lot of the stuff that Boris Johnson frankly wasn't. We all get that. So was it the case that the Scottish electorate voted Conservative in larger numbers than usual in 2017 because of Ruth Davidson? Is that what we're thinking? I'm not sure. Because in 2020, a year ago, when Ruth Davidson had gone, Scottish Conservatives voted in more or less the same numbers. Scottish electorate voted more than for the Scottish Conservatives as they had done in 2017. After which, Ruth Davidson had left and gone to the House of Lords. And of course, you remember, Mev, that every week in Holyrood, that was a rich mine which Nicola Sturgeon could see and just say, okay, you're going to the House of Lords. Why should we listen to you? You're leaving this democratic chamber for an unelected chamber and all this stuff. So is it the case, definitely, that people in 2017 voted for the Conservatives because of Ruth Davidson? Or is it just because they just fancied voting Conservative? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because I look at the numbers and they were the same in 2017 and in 2021. So firstly, when Ruth Davidson was there, and secondly, when she'd gone. So I'm not sure. What do you think? Do you think it's correlation between the two? What do you think?
Well, very briefly, voting intentions and the undercurrents of voting patterns are quite complex. I mean, each individual voter will have a personal tipping point. Again, one of the interesting aspects of the polling that I did a couple of years ago showed that of the three issues that changed voting intentions over the years, over the last 15 plus years, between a minimum of 10% of Labour voters who were still voting Labour at that point had three reasons to not vote Labour, or about 90% of Labour voters had one good reason to not vote Labour. The reality will be somewhere in between. So, some will have one reason not to vote Labour, some will have two, some will have three. But Labour, even currently, is in a very precarious position. And that's based on Labour's history of really, doing things that, undermine the support of their voting base. To get back to your point, there is a drift away. I mean, as each individual voter reaches their personal tipping point to not vote Labour, they looked at, okay, if I'm not going to vote Labour, who am I going to vote for? Roughly 500,000 have gone to the SNP.
Wow.
Exactly. That's a massive number. Over half of the SNP voters have been, in recent years, in the last 10 or 15 years, Labour voters.
Yes.
So Labour has literally driven 500,000 of their supporters into the SNP camp.
It's staggering. Those are staggering numbers, Mev. I mean, almost incalculable numbers. And I was talking about this on another podcast last week or a couple of weeks ago. I remember in maybe 2007, 2008, whenever it was, I'm not sure. Peter Kearney, who was the SNP's media spokesperson, made a big play about the Catholic Church and the fact that the SNP were closely aligned with the Catholic Church. And I can remember a particular issue, which was that the Catholic Church, or representatives thereof, had said to the Scottish Labour, who were in power at the time, you cannot force us to go along with single-sex adoption. You have to preclude us from that and make it clear that Catholic families will not be, or Catholic family children will not be housed with same-sex adoptive families. And of course, the Labour Party said, we can't possibly agree with that because that's ludicrous. There's nothing remotely wrong with single-sex families raising children. And the Catholic Church representatives thereof said, well, in that case, we're not going to vote for you. And Salmon, that despicable character, said, no, you come with us, we'll sort it out for you, don't worry about it, we'll sort it out for you. And this is a matter of record that happened. So that's one of the reasons why that block vote moved from the Scottish Labour to the SNP over the issue of single-sex families adopting children. And so what I find truly bizarre about that is these days the SNP model themselves as a progressive party. Progressive? Who are you kidding? And you're the guys who said, no, don't worry, we won't force you to have your children adopted by single-sex couples. Not that they can do anything about it, of course, because to do so would be, genuinely, that you can't do that. You cannot possibly say, I'm not having any children adopted with single-sex couples, because there's no reason why they shouldn't be. So that's what happened. And the point I'm trying to make here, Mev, is when that block vote moved from Labour, Scottish Labour, to the SNP, it wasn't for altruistic reasons. It wasn't for progressive reasons. It was pandering to very, very base elements, very base feelings in the minds of those people who moved. So this is why I can't quite grasp why these people still have this grip on the Scottish electorate, because the Scottish electorate prides itself on being quite socialist and quite progressive and quite forward-looking. And in the same breath, they're saying, oh no, we're single-sex couples. No, oh my God, no, we're not having that. And I find it appalling, I really do. But this is what the SNP seem to have done. They've styled themselves as a progressive party when in fact they're nothing of the sort. And it's just a complete con job, as everything they've done has been. It's just playing a confidence trick on the Scottish electorate to make out that they are in fact progressive, forward-thinking, inclusive, diverse, welcoming, whatever. Whereas, in fact, they're nothing of the kind. Nothing of the kind. They are like every other nationalist party in history, based on whose doctrine is based on fear, suspicion, resentment, and hatred of another group, be it another party, another religion, or another race. And that's what they are. And that's why I detest them, and that's why I will always fight against them. What do you think, Mev?
I mean, certainly, one of the things that does impress me about Nicola Sturgeon is she is an excellent communicator. And I often joke that you can go back to Roman times, you will not find a better communicator in Western history at all, ever. Nothing close. One of the things she is a master of is subtext. And if you look at any message from the SNP or from Nicola Sturgeon, the subtext of the message is we're nice, they're nasty.
Absolutely right.
You know, the unionist parties just keep tripping over themselves. If there's a banana skin out there, they will find it and slip up. Sturgeon doesn't make those kind of mistakes. She's really good at connecting with voters. And again, you touch on an interesting point there, the gap between perception and reality. Sturgeon is, in terms of an image consultant or an image manager, she is without equal. You know, she can create an image of the party that fits her agenda to further independence. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, I think a common theme of most nationalist parties is you know, not all the problems in your life, it's their fault. If we can get rid of them, all the problems in your life will go away. And one of the problems, again, with my conservative unionist parties is they're really, really, really bad at countering that narrative.
Absolutely right.
Quite often they play into it, if anything. And it's you know, her messaging is just, as I said, I mean, I cannot think for politics. I mean, I'm not a political historian by any stretch, but you know, I've got a very keen interest, obviously.
Sure.
But from what I have looked at, you know, I just don't see any politician anywhere near Sturgeon. You know, and again, you know, when I talk to people in England about this issue or this aspect of Sturgeon, you know, if you look at the constituency vote last year, if you prorated that to a Westminster UK election, she would have won over 600 out of 650 seats.
Absolutely true. Exactly.
Has any British Prime Minister come anywhere close to that? That is how good Sturgeon is. I mean, she is a political genius.
Indeed.
But when it comes to policy and running a country, you know,
exactly.
And the gap between perception and reality, and that to me is the opportunity for a unionist. You know, that if the union is going to be saved, that gap needs to be closed, and they need to see the SNP for what they are. And again, one of the other issues is their track record. I mean, I think most people accept it's got problems. Depending on who you're speaking to, even most SNP voters will say, well, you know, they could do better. Really? The drug deaths, worse than Europe, by far.
Quite.
You know, 3 times worse than the UK. You know, the track record is awful. And you can go through the policy spectrum. You know, big issues is always the economy, the NHS, education, law and order. Big issues. The track record is poor. But for a lot of voters, they say, well, what would the Tories do different? What would Labour do different? And they know there's no answers to those points. So, you know, and again, something like 10% of SNP voters are card-carrying unionists. They do see that the SNP is better at delivering. They're not good, they're not competent, but they're better than the alternative. And one of the phrases I use all the time is Tina, there is no alternative.
Yep.
And until that changes, the SNP are staying put.
You're so right. I mean, you're echoing much of what I've said in these podcasts in recent weeks. Just to go back to the point you made, and this is a crucial point, the SNP are pretty much guaranteed more or less 40% across the board in every constituency in Scotland, 50% overall, near enough of the total vote. In the last year's Scottish Holyrood election, the SNP in constituencies took 49.9% of the vote. If any political party in Westminster took 49.9% of the vote, exactly as you say, they would get probably 500 to 600 seats. Absolutely right. That is an absolute whitewash, landslide. That's what it is. That's what it is. And so we are faced with all of the pro-UK parties, supposedly, purportedly pro-UK parties, the Scottish Conservatives, Scottish Labour, Lib Dems, and the myriad small parties, who among themselves can only amass 49 or 50.1%, not enough to stop the SNP. And so the SNP took 49.9% of the votes last year in constituencies and 85% of the seats, which is about right for 49.9% of the vote. The pro-UK parties took 50.1% of the votes and 14.9% of the seats. So our point a year ago, All for Unity, the party with which I was involved a year ago, said, don't stand, all three of you, stand just one candidate and then you've got a chance of beating them. And they said, no, we can't do that, because what's important is we offer a cocktail of pro-UK options. And you just think, my God, how stupid are you? Seriously. You've got one party which is coalesced. It's one party which constitutes what's the word? A coalition of various viewpoints, because the SNP today is not the same as the SNP 20 years ago, Mev. You know this. 20, 30 years ago, the SNP was a bunch of chuchters. That's what they were. A bunch of kind of light, idealistic chuchters who had their roots in the past and their heads in the past, and they thought that it was still the 14th century and we still had to beat Edward Longshanks and free Scotland. That's what they were, okay? That's what they were. Then oil came around, the North Sea oil, and they said, oh, no, it's our oil, therefore we can be a self-sufficient country. Okay, yeah, fine. That 40 years ago, maybe it might have happened. There was a possibility. 50 years ago, maybe. But for various reasons, it didn't, okay? Then they moved on, and they became latterly, after 2010, after 2007, 2010, they became an alternative to Labour. And the fact is, most of the people who were voting Labour 10, 15 years ago are now voting SNP. We know that. Most of them are voting SNP now because of the Iraq War, because they still don't like the Tories because of Margaret Thatcher, and because they feel this general sense of unease that, or disquiet that the party they vote for is not the party that gets elected in Westminster. And so their answer to that is, okay, if we vote Labour, Labour doesn't get become the party of government, therefore we'll vote SNP, because SNP are going to field 59 seats out of 650. Therefore, we're going to get our voices heard. Well, how's that going to work then, guys? So these people who were voting Labour before are now voting SNP. The SNP only stand in, 1/7 of the number of seats. Therefore, they're never going to get their party of choice elected as the leaders or the party of government. But then they've got the nerve to say, oh, we didn't get the party we voted for in government. That's because you voted for a party which only stood in 59 of the 650 seats, guys. So, what we're seeing with the SNP vote, in my opinion, is a generic sense of dissatisfaction with the UK electoral system. Nothing more. I don't believe that the people who vote SNP genuinely want Scotland to be independent, because let's be honest, Scotland cannot be independent. It could be, but every person in Scotland would be significantly, materially worse off than they are now. So why would you vote for that? Why in the name of God would you vote for a set of circumstances which will make your house worth less, which will make the pound in your pocket, or the currency, whatever the currency is in your pocket, worth significantly less, and would leave you with fewer job opportunities for yourselves, your children, and your children's children? Why would you do that? For what? Because you don't like what? Boris Johnson? That's absurd. Why are we doing this? Why are we letting these people vent their steam in such a way that they really feel that the only answer is to break up the country? And that is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about independence. Scotland is part of the UK. The UK is independent. Scotland itself is not independent, but Scotland is a small part of Great Britain, which is in itself is a part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. What's this independence nonsense? Independent of whom or of what? It doesn't make any sense. Scotland is not put upon. It's not a country which is oppressed. Nothing of the sort. There have been Scottish prime ministers, there have been Scottish cabinet ministers for decades. There is no need for Scotland to be independent, because for Scotland to be independent, in terms of what the nationalists mean, is for Scotland to be significantly worse off. Is that what you want? Well, it's not what I want. So however altruistic you think you are, saying, oh, I would pay any price to make Scotland independent, we don't care. You're not going to do it, because you don't get to break up a country just because you've got some sense of disquiet or dissatisfaction at what happened in the past. We're not going to let it happen. So we have to stop this. So the only question we've got is, how do we stop it? Because we've got the situation right now where the SNP is getting the majority of Scottish votes. And let's just be clear here. Of the people who vote, yes, they get more or less 50%, but of the people in Scotland, that their share of the vote is about 31%. So it's not even close to a majority. It's not even anywhere near a majority. Ergo, therefore, it is nothing like enough to enable the United Kingdom to be broken up. Because what they are talking about here, Mev, let's be clear, is the SNP want to break up the United Kingdom. That's what we're talking about. They've got no real plan. They've got no real plan at all. We know that. There's no economic case. They don't even know what currency will trade in. They can't tell us which parts of Scotland will stay and which will go. Shetland and Orkney will not stay. They will not want to stay with Scotland if Scotland becomes independent. South of Scotland probably won't either. Edinburgh probably won't either. The Western Isles probably won't. All you're going to have left is the people who want to go, maybe be Glasgow and Dundee, as per the 2014 referendum. Only Glasgow and only Dundee voted to stay to become independent. Every other region of Scotland said, no, we don't want this. We don't want this. And that was only just 7.5 years ago. And all we've heard since then is, no, we must have another referendum. But we know what would happen if there was a second referendum, Mev. As soon as it was held and as soon as they lost, they'd say, okay, let's have a third. No, stop. We're not doing this. We're not going to have this. We have to have a situation where the UK government says we will not allow secession attempts without meeting these criteria first. What the All for Unity last year called a Clarity Act, what they've done, what they've enacted in Canada after they had two elections or two referendums in Quebec to say, would you like to be independent? The first one was like 49.9% yes and 50.1% no. Second one was a lot more substantial in terms of no, we're not doing this. We need to do something like that, because otherwise Scotland will be in this never-ending, in these doldrums of going nowhere, while these increasingly desperate separatists say we must have independence. Boris Johnson is not something to our liking, therefore Scotland must be independent. No, we're not having it. If you want to do it, you enact legislation to say within these parameters, you can have your vote. If you win that, then fine. Without that, you're not getting another vote. Mev, what's your view? What do you think?
Cheers. David, you raised about a dozen plus points there, and it's I should have been writing them down as you aired them.
Sorry.
Where do I start? I mean, I think one of my main concerns with respect to the independence movement is, the United Kingdom is born from an act of parliament, or Scotland as part of the Union is born from an act of parliament. We were created by an act of parliament, which can be dissolved by an act of parliament.
Quite
right. In the wider context, and I don't know, it sounds like you have viewers from Northern Ireland here. So they're familiar, obviously, with the Good Friday Agreement, and yes, that agreement gives them the right, if they meet certain criteria, to have a border poll every 7 years. Yep. Now, that sounds pretty ridiculous to me, but every 7 years, really? Is that? Exactly. But that is in the agreement. Now, one of my concerns is if Sinn Féin win this year, oh my gosh, it's this year, yeah. And looking, the most recent poll from Lucid Talk does show that Michelle O'Neill's way ahead of the DUP. I think it's 25 to 18%. So Michelle, it looks like, unless something significant happens to shift the voting intentions, Michelle O'Neill is going to be the next Northern Ireland First Minister. Now, she's going to be talking about border polls as much as Nicola Sturgeon talks about independence referendums. So my concern is Nicola Sturgeon will find some legal argument that requires or supports her case or her call for IndyRef2. So that's one concern. I suspect they will mount a legal challenge of some sort, basically to say, if voters in Northern Ireland have the right to have a border poll every 7 years, we should have the right to have an IndyRef2 or 3 or 4 every 7 years until we win it. So that's one concern. Beyond that, in terms of voting intentions, I mean, the three classic drivers is the party leader, the party policies, and the party values. Now, party values typically don't change very much over time, but you made a good point earlier in that the SNP of the 70s, 80s, and even 20 years ago is quite different from today. So party values change, perhaps subtly, but they do change. Policies can change quite dramatically from election to election, obviously, that goes without saying. Beyond that, the party leader, and this is where I refer back to Nicola Sturgeon being one of the most effective communicators in 2,000 years. She is good. Whatever you might think of her ambitions or her policies or her track record, she crushes the media. I don't know if you saw a paper article a few months ago, but the SNP, the other thing is the SNP has more press officers than the BBC has reporters. They take the media communications seriously. The Tories don't, Labour don't, Lib Dems don't. I mean, I've got Google alerts and all the party names and the party leaders and the key players within the parties. There are days when nothing comes up for the Scottish Tories. Nothing comes up for Labour, nothing comes up for the Lib Dems. SNP dominate the media daily. Every day we've got a ton of stuff coming up. And again, quite often when I get a Google alert for the Tories, Labour, the Lib Dems, it's in response to an SNP press release. The SNP have said this, sent out a press release to the newspaper. The newspaper, oh, well, this is interesting. I wonder what the Tories can do. Or again, it can be the SNP criticising the Tory party, the Labour party, the Lib Dems. The communications of the unionist parties is just so close to nil.
Absolutely.
Very close to nil. So, again, this is how the media is crucial for any political party. It's advertising. If you want to sell your product, whether it be a car or a bag of crisps or whatever, you've got to communicate with your customers that this is the best car, this is the best bag of crisps that you'll ever have. The unionist party are sitting on their backsides doing nothing. They're basically political punch bags for the SNP. They just launch into them on a daily basis, and they just take the punches. It's embarrassing to watch. It's like adult taking the stabilizers off the bicycle for the first time as 6-year-olds zoom past them on who have mastered the art of riding a bicycle without stabilizers. It's just embarrassing. It's beyond ridiculous. I mean, it's hard to imagine this is what Scottish politics is about, but this is the reality. God, I mean, in terms of your other points, I mean, you mentioned currency. I mean, the SNP currency policy is sterlingization. Now, I had a piece in the Times about this last Monday. It's a third world currency arrangement.
Absolutely right.
If you look into it, it's countries like Zimbabwe and Panama and El Salvador and Palau, which most people couldn't find on a map. That's the level of debate we have in this country. I mean, the SNP, that's been the policy for 4 years. Nobody's picked up on it. When I looked into it, it's like, oh my gosh, how have they gotten away with this for 4 years? It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
We'd be living, and beyond that, Scotland's got a massive financial service sector, major, big contributor to corporate taxes. They cannot operate in a country that has a third world currency arrangement. They will literally have to move their head offices
straight out the door. Exactly, straight out. Yep.
It's just, and the unions are just sort of sitting there scratching their heads, wondering what's going on around them. It's just beyond ridiculous. And,
Yes.
and again, you can go through the policy spectrum and just look at the flaws in SNP policy. It's nonsense, but
it's nonsense.
Nothing.
Exactly. So this. I mean, you know this. You probably will remember a year ago, 18 months ago, George Galloway, who's one of Scotland's leading political lights, decided that the answer here was to persuade the pro-UK main parties to be sensible and to stand one candidate in constituencies and to come to an agreement in the list for the Holyrood elections. And every one of them said, nope, we're not interested. We're not going to do it. So what happened instead was the SNP stood with their laughable manifesto of Scotland's going to be independent at the time of a global pandemic, an unprecedented global pandemic, but we're going to be independent nonetheless. And we're going to have a new currency. We don't know what it is, and we're not sure when it's going to be, but it'll be all right. Everything will be fine. So this is what they did. And the opposition MSPs said, okay then. And they said, okay, we're not going to stand our candidates down in any constituencies. Oh no. And so consequently, in 2021, a year ago, or 10 months ago, whatever it was, in all of the, how many constituencies is it? I think it's 73 constituencies in Holyrood. The SNP stood against a Conservative candidate, a Labour candidate, and a Liberal Democrat candidate. Now, the SNP took 1,200,000 votes in constituencies, and they returned 62 MSPs out of 73. The Conservatives, Labour, and Liberal Democrats took 1,170,000 votes for their losing candidates. So 1,170,000 votes went to losing pro-UK constituency candidates. Think about that number. It's almost as many people as voted for the SNP, and the SNP got 62 seats. And the three parties together amassed 11 constituency seats from more votes. So, just to repeat, the SNP took 49.9% of the votes and won 85% of the constituency seats. The pro-UK parties took 50.1% of the votes and won 14.9% of the seats. Had we, us guys who are active on social media and trying to make something different, had we not said anything about that, then in 3 months' time, the same thing would happen. And the strong likelihood is that the same thing will happen, because the main parties are still going to stand their own candidates. The SNP is still going to stand their candidates in most council wards, and they're going to win 50% of the seats. Therefore, they're going to win 70 to 80% of the councillors. How long are we going to do this? How long are we going to allow a situation in Scotland where an extremist party with no real manifesto as such, other than it's all England's fault, it's all Boris Johnson's fault, don't you worry, we'll sort it all out, leave it to us, don't worry about anything, wheesht for Indy, let it all happen, don't worry, don't say a word to rock the boat. How long are we going to let them say this, perpetrate this total lie on the population of Scotland? We have to stop this, but we have to have an alternative to give them, because, as you said, Tina, what is the alternative? Margaret Thatcher used to say this: there is no alternative, we are the centre party. You're right. Who's the centre party now? Who's the opposition party now? Scottish Conservatives? The Scottish Conservative leader thinks that the Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, should lose his job. Okay, you've got Anna Sarwar, who thinks that we're still in the 1970s and that all Labour have to do is finish on top of the Conservatives and they'll be in power again. So he is campaigning as if the SNP doesn't exist. The Liberal Democrats think that they're still fighting the Brexit campaign and that we should stay in Europe. I'm terribly sorry, guys, but we've left Europe. Okay, so no offence, but you kind of maybe move on. How's that? And you've got the rest of the small parties, like All Free Unity last year. All Free Unity last year came up with the idea, and George Galloway was the visionary here, and I only say this because it's true. George Galloway said, In the event that you've got a party which stands only on the list and doesn't stand in any of the constituency seats, all of their votes will count in full on the list. Whereas if you've got a party like the Conservatives or Labour or Liberal Democrats who win, or one of whom wins a seat in that region, all of their list votes thereafter are halved in value. If they win 2 seats, their votes are divided by 3 in value. Therefore, a vote for All for Unity or any list-only party is worth potentially twice, 3 times, 4 times the votes given to a main party which stands constituents in that region. Nobody listened because, frankly, Mev, all of the Labour politicians just wanted to return their MSPs. All of the Conservative parties simply wanted to return their MSPs. They didn't care at all about the SNP being outnumbered by pro-UK candidates. They didn't care about it at all. All they cared about was getting their own party's MSPs returned, and that's the problem we had last year. This year it's not going to be any different. It really isn't going to be any different because the SNP will, no doubt, win most of the votes, therefore they'll win most of the seats. What I believe, and this is my contention, what I believe we have to do is get ourselves sorted out for the next time, be it in a Westminster election, which is going to be 2.5 years' time tops. A lot of people think it's going to be next year because Boris Johnson, as we all know, is under a lot of pressure. Or for the next Holyrood election, we have got to get ourselves lined up, ducks in a row, in order to be able to fight these people, because the truth is, until we have one party, one pro-UK party in Scotland fighting the SNP, then the SNP are going to carry on winning every election. And that's going to carry on for years, if not decades. What's your feeling, Mev? What do you think about that?
Well, firstly, in terms of decades, you're right there. I did, Ipsos Mori did a survey, a Scottish political survey in November for STV, and they published the results in December. But STV missed a couple of big issues. Firstly, when I did a deep dive on the survey, I noticed a major trend, a 10-year plus trend of tactical voting from the nationalists. Basically, what's happening is around about 1% of SNP constituency voters are shifting to the Greens in the regional list votes per year.
Yep.
So that's over 10% since 2011. If you project that forward to 2026, let me give you some figures. In 2011, the SNP got 97% of their constituency votes in the regional list, and 3% went to other parties.
Yep.
The last election, last year, it was about 84% of their constituency votes voted SNP in the regional list. The rest largely went to the Greens.
Exactly.
In the voting intentions for 2026, that goes down to 81%, and again, the bulk goes to the Greens. If you project the graph forward,
that figure's going to go down and down and down. Exactly. Exactly.
The SNP and the Greens are going to be in office for at least 20 years.
Absolutely right. And this is what I've said. This is exactly what I've said. Niall Fraser, my colleague, and I have said this for weeks, months now.
Yeah.
You can see which way the wind's blowing here. The SNP and Greens have not gone into coalition by accident. You know what's going to happen. In 2021, a year ago, the SNP took 1.2 million constituency votes and won 62 seats. They took 1 million plus list votes and won 2 seats. That's exactly 500,000 votes per seat. They're not going to do that again, Mev. We know they're not going to do that again. I'm not a stupid man, but I'm not massively intellectual, but I can see what's going to happen. They're going to say, I tell you what, you guys, we'll stand down on the list. You, Lorna, and whatever his name is, God, what's his name? The leader
Patrick,
of the... Yes, Patrick. And Ross Grew, my God, Jesus. These guys, they're going to say to them, okay, you guys, you can mop up all the list seats. You know what's going to happen. Because they're going to want to keep the Alba out, if nothing else. So the genuine fear is that in 4 or 5 years' time, we're going to see a Holyrood election where the SNP/Green Alliance gets maybe 110 seats. And what are the Conservative and Labour and Liberal Democrats going to do about that? What are they going to do to prevent that happening? I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to say, oh no, what we've got to do is we've got to give the unionist voters a cocktail, a smorgasbord of pro-UK options, and you just say, my God, you guys have got no idea. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to get absolutely eviscerated if you do this. You're going to get wiped out. And as I said to you, I think I said this to you the last time we spoke, out of morbid curiosity, I'd quite like to see it, just to see those utter imbeciles proved wrong. Because we can see it now, but they can't see it. The Conservative, Labour and the Liberals apparently can't see it. In 3-4 years' time, whatever the election is, they are going to get absolutely blitzed. And they're still saying, no, 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 no. We are the only choice. Anna Sarwar, just yesterday, was walking along, wherever it was, on Guile Street with a camera saying, oh, Boris Johnson is not welcome here. I hope this is the last time he comes here. The only way to deal with Boris Johnson is to replace him with the Labour Party. My God, Annis, you're the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. You're third. You're in third place in Scotland. Your big beef is with this SNP, and you're talking about the UK Conservative Party. For God's sake, man, don't you understand? Forget the 70s politics. Forget the fact that, it used to be blue against red. Stand up for what you actually believe in, which is the United Kingdom. If you can't do that, leave your job and let somebody else do it. Because if you can't bring yourself to say, I'm a unionist and I stand up for the UK as a part of the UK Labour Party, albeit the Scottish division, you're in the wrong job. You're in the wrong job. If you cannot see in your own head that your real fight is with the SNP, then I genuinely don't know why you're in politics, because everyone else in Scotland can see it except you, seemingly. And I am just aghast at what I see from these people. Douglas Ross the same. Douglas Ross took it upon himself 4 weeks ago to say, Boris Johnson must stand down. Really, Douglas? Okay, well, it's not your damn call, pal. No offence, whatever Boris Johnson's done, it's not your call. If he feels that strongly, why doesn't he leave the UK Conservative Party, whom he serves as a Westminster MP to this day? Why doesn't he leave? Why doesn't he say, I'm vacating my seat? Why doesn't he do that if he doesn't agree with his boss? It's just, you're seeing people who are truthfully inadequate at sticking up for what they genuinely believe in. And they're paying lip service to doing what they think is the right thing to do. And it is just nauseating. And in the meantime, where we're heading is a grave constitutional crisis, in as much as you've got the SNP saying, we want to be independent. And you've got the UK Conservative Party saying, no, you're not getting a referendum. And all you're getting is these two forces banging heads like this, and it's just going on and on and on. And meanwhile, Scotland has not been governed. Scotland has been mismanaged like never before. Education, health, policing, transport, elderly care, everything worse than it's ever been. You'll know this. You're an oldish chap like I am, Mev. Have you ever seen a situation like this? Scotland's education is going down the toilet, absolutely down the toilet. Scotland's health. The NHS in Scotland is an absolute crying disgrace. Care for the elderly, my God. A year ago, they were putting people with COVID into care homes, and elderly people were dying. My God, it's just unbelievable what's happening in Scotland. I yesterday said there are parallels between the rise of the Nazis, that TV show, and the way that the SNP have taken and consolidated power. I've got the National, that rag of a newspaper, chasing me for quotes because they're going to write a story about me tomorrow because I've dared to speak out. And that's what it's like in Scotland. You speak out, you get this goon squad saying, "How dare you say that? We're going to find faults in what you've done in your life," But it is absolutely true. And so we are living in desperate times, terrible times. We have to do something to overcome this. We have to do something to stop this. Otherwise, it's going to get worse and worse. Decades is right. It's going to be 20 years at least until we get somebody else who's going to replace these people. And God knows what they're going to do in the meantime, particularly if the Greens keep being able to mould them into their way of thinking. So they're talking about tolls in the M8 now. Tolls in the M8. For God's sake. This is how we're going to encourage and stimulate the Scottish economy, by putting tolls on the main route between Glasgow and Edinburgh, our two principal cities. Jesus, I mean, somebody, please tell me what's the end. How can we get out of this, Mev? Tell me. Give me something. Tell me something positive that I can hang on to, please.
As the saying goes, David, there's two hopes: Bob Hope and no hope.
Bob, as Don King says, Bob Hope and Bob and Slim is out of town. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, you've raised a laundry list of really good points there, and I need next time we speak, I'll have to have a pen and paper handy to write them down so I don't forget them, because they all need to be addressed.
Yep.
But to make the second point I mentioned earlier, beyond the tactical voting trend in the nationalist camp, there's also demographic issues for Labour and Lib Dems. 15 years ago, 60% or so of young voters were voting Labour.
Yep.
Right. They're now 60% are now voting SNP.
Yep.
So Labour has basically got a massive demographic problem in that as older voters pass on, they're not being replaced by younger voters. So they've got an existential problem. And in 10 years' time, their vote will every year, their vote will go down. It's as simple as that. And the same is true for the Lib Dems. They've got major existential problems. The Conservatives is not so much of an issue, but they only appeal to a section of society. I don't see them ever breaking out of 20-25% of the vote in Scotland. I just don't. It's something transformational. I mean, the Scottish Unionist Party in the 50s, 60s, they had, in the 50s, they had the majority vote in Scotland. Then that went down. It started to go down in the late 50s into the 60s, and then Labour became the dominant force. But it takes something substantial to break the Scottish Tories above 25%. And certainly at the moment, I mean, I mentioned I stood for the Tories in 2005. I left the party shortly afterwards, rejoined in 2011 after the SNP landslide. And what I witnessed in my second stint in the Tory party was Ruth Davidson stamping her authority on the party. And I mean, to me, she basically gutted it off anybody that would possibly challenge her leadership. And what you have now is essentially two types of MSPs. The old hands have been whipped by the party of machinery, and the new intakes that have been handpicked by Ruth to support Ruth, and now she's gone. So you basically have a parliamentary group that has got no life or very little life experience on the one hand, and the SNP on the other. And it's the Scottish Tories. If people hope the Tories will save the Union, forget it.
Exactly.
Labour and the Lib Dems are on the way out.
Yep.
So the future for and to look at your point of tactical voting within the Unionist voters, the problem you've got there is you're voting for parties that are just not up to the task of defending the Union. Some of your viewers who are in Northern Ireland may recall a poll I did in a couple of a bit years ago about the impact the NHS would have on an Irish border poll.
Yes.
And it's about 25-26% swing in favour of the Union, right?
Yep.
The Unionists, the Scottish elected Unionists today are not defending the Union. They're not champions for the Union. If you vote for independence, what changes? And that has got to be the basis of your message to the public.
Yeah.
What changes? And they're just not doing it. And again, the Scottish Conservatives, they will never say anything positive about Brexit.
Absolutely right.
And again, that comes back to my point, my view, which has developed in recent times, that the biggest threat to the unions is actually the Scottish Conservative Party. They will not defend the union, and they will not defend Brexit. They will not champion the union. They will not champion Brexit. Ruth Davidson running around with the Union Jack and smiling for cameras and shouting, "I'll defend the union." That's not actually defending it. That's just waving a flag.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And when Boris Johnson replaced Theresa May as Prime Minister in 2019, Ruth Davidson could not get out of town fast enough. You could not see her for dust as she shot out of town. She came back last year to replace the wretched Jackson Carlaw, who was frankly just not worthy of consideration as a party leader. So she came back. And every week in First Minister's Questions, Sturgeon said, "Why would we listen to you? You're going to the House of Lords." Why would we listen to you? You're going to the House of Lords. Why would you listen to you? I understand she's got personal reasons for doing that. That's great, but Ruth Davidson is no longer a consideration in Scottish politics because she's in the House of Lords. That's what she's chosen to do. Now, if she really felt so strongly about Boris Johnson, as she claims, then she wouldn't have taken his endorsement to go into the House of Lords, but she did. So I have absolutely no truck whatever, nothing. I cannot tell you how poorly I view the Scottish Conservatives. Genuinely, go on.
For a second. And this again goes back to my view that the Scottish Conservatives is the biggest threat to the Union.
Yeah, go on, yeah.
I was Nicola Sturgeon's campaign manager. I would dig out every picture of Nicola Sturgeon and Ruth Davidson standing shoulder to shoulder campaigning to stay in the European Union.
Absolutely right.
And that's what I would do.
Yep.
And if you Google it, there's pictures out there with the pair of them holding their, remain in the European Union. I'd have that picture on every bus stop, the side of every bus, the back of every bus, every billboard in the country, of Ruth Davidson shoulder to shoulder with Nicola Sturgeon to remain in the European Union.
Absolutely right.
She is absolutely one of the biggest threats. Now, again, going back to my point earlier, 250,000 Labour voters switched to the Tories because they wanted Brexit.
That's right.
That was despite Ruth Davidson, not because of her.
Quite right.
But as I was, as a party member, when you go to conferences, they think, and again, in fairness to Ruth Davidson, she is photogenic, she is charismatic, she's got the gift of the gab, she's a brilliant debater, she's got a bubbly personality, she's a really nice person, she's got an infectious enthusiasm. I get why a lot of people really like her, but my thing is policy, right? Policy is a big part of what drives voting intentions, and Ruth hasn't. She just doesn't have a feel for policy at all.
Agreed.
And
I couldn't agree more. It's just, she's talented, no doubt. She's charismatic. She got people to vote for the Conservative Party in Scotland in 2000. She did, and then she fucked off because she didn't like Boris Johnson. She didn't want the UK to leave the EU. Well, terribly sorry, Ruth, but that's kind of how they voted. With the greatest respect, Anyway, so now you're right. Indeed, and the people have spoken, the bastards, as they say. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we've kind of run out of time. Mev, I knew it was going to be an absolute pleasure to have you on tonight, and so it has proved. So it's proven. So we will do this again, if that's okay, very soon between now and the May elections. Just for everyone's knowledge, I've said this in the last couple of podcasts that I've recently taken on a role to head up a political strategy group within the Scottish Unionist Party. Mev is a key player in all of this in terms of he's part of the decision-making committee, and we're going to be coming up with a tactical voting guide in the next few days, into which Mev will provide some input. So you're going to hearing more from both of us in the next few weeks. Just so you know, these things only last an hour, so I have to wrap this up now. So, but it was terrific having you on, and I'm looking forward to having you on again. And we will speak on Friday night, Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. I got that right, didn't I? 4 p.m.
You did.
Brilliant, fantastic. So anyway, listen, just a couple of words for you, for the viewers and the listeners tonight, Mev, if you could please tell us, give us a couple of words, a couple of words with which to leave us.
Gosh, honestly, the stuff we didn't cover is greater than the stuff we did.
Absolutely.
Your viewers will be interested in future conversations we have, and I do believe in the strength of the union. I do believe it will be here in 100 years and 1,000 years. At the moment, it looks rocky. Have faith in the future.
Well said. Fantastic. I love that. I love a bit of an uplifting message with which to finish the podcast. So anyway, guys, Mev, can I just thank you for being here? It's been great. It was only, and let me just say that it was only 24 hours notice that Mev was able to step in. And as you've all seen, he is an absolute quality contributor to our discussions. And we're going to carry on doing exactly what we're doing, which is doing everything we can to maintain the UK, to maintain Scotland's place within the UK and to cement Scotland's place within the UK, because we're going absolutely nowhere. Doesn't matter how many rabid nationalists make up stories about pensions or anything else. We are not going to let these fools break up our country. It's not going to happen. And it's because of guys like Mev and me that we are going to make sure that the fight is taken to the nationalists every single day. And I can guarantee you that's what's going to happen. So bear with us, guys, because you're going to see a lot more from people like Mev and me, okay? So anyway, listen, Mev, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
We'll do this again very soon. And thank you all for listening and for contributing. And we will speak again in weeks to come. And watch out for more podcasts, and watch out for more, if you like, discussions about how we should vote in the coming election, in terms of by way of making sure that we get proper representation from pro-UK representatives. So anyway, guys, thank you all, guys and girls. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Mev, for contributing, and I'll see you all next week. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Mev. Good night. Good night. Good night.
There are any number of issues in Scotland that need addressing. Health, education, drug deaths, the economy, but all of those are taking a back seat at this conference to one issue above all else, and that's an independence referendum.
Scotland doesn't want a Boris Johnson government. It doesn't want to leave the European Union, and it wants to be able to determine its own future, whatever that future turns out to be. And this idea that the Tories can just say no and sort of imprison Scotland in a union against its will, I just don't think will hold.
Independence is what the SNP is all about, and Nicola Sturgeon is expected to reinforce that massively at this conference. There will be no chance for people who are against the First Minister's policies to get a hearing.
We invite you to explore our great city and the heedless impact of our dedicated nationalist politicians. Enjoy the triumphs of our great pretender, television's Nicola Sturgeon. Thanks to her, we boast the highest drug and alcohol death rates in Europe, and a life expectancy that's also the lowest in Western Europe. Now there's some records for all you leaders to check out during your visit. Why not take a stroll out of the SECC to see attractions like rubbish strewn everywhere, thanks to highly paid and wholly ineffective Susan Aitken? She'll bluff, bluster, and take her huge salary, but never actually empty the bins or fix the roads.
Quite simply, we have had enough.
And watch out for the plague of uncontrollable rats.
All cities have rats.
Cheeky little critters. Or why not visit Govanhill to see deprivation firsthand, courtesy of Nicola's Gauleiter, Murray Hunter. Just don't go looking for a library, because First Councillor Nicola Sturgeon has closed most of them. You've got to destroy the whole education system to keep the poverty cycle alive, right, Nicola? In the evening, take a stroll to Glasgow's magical Museum of Invisible Things, the curation of all Nicola's best promises she never enacted, the invisible HQ of Nicola's promised public energy company, and many absent benefits of the climate change targets she's missed year after year after year, the invisible improvements to our broken NHS waiting times, and some advice: whatever you do, don't have an accident, and don't phone an ambulance, because you won't get one. So, international leaders, have you seen enough credible action yet? Take a look at our tragically distracted border-building parochial leaders, and imagine what this city and our amazing people could be if it were not for the malignant SNP.